So first up, the Madlanga Commission will continue to hear evidence from witnesses, and this is in relation to the allegations made by General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. We take you now to our team that's out in Pretoria with agenda anchor Ayanda Nyathi, as well as reporter Canny Maphanga out there for us this hour. So Ayanda, phase one of the commission continues to take phase, and the allegations as well as the details continue to be laid bare.
Without a doubt, Mxolisi, welcome back to the Madlanga Justice College, where I have to admit the weather feels a bit schizophrenic within the hour. It feels like we've experienced both winter and summer, but I suppose that has to do with that weather warning of heavy downpours in at least 5 provinces in the country, including Gauteng. But the weather, of course, is not what's top of mind for many people watching this story. It's about getting to the bottom of those startling allegations of meddling within the work of the SAPS. Yesterday, we heard crime intelligence boss Dumisani Kumalo wrap up his testimony. He's really taken his time to take us through what he knew and didn't know about that controversial letter that was made public on the 31st of December, essentially paving the way for the series of events that unfolded to the point when Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi had that bombshell briefing in July, and to where we are now, where we've heard from a number of witnesses. Incidentally, Dumisani Kumalo today is going to be in court also in Pretoria, and this has to do with a case that essentially was spearheaded by IDAC, that's the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption, to do with essentially an HR matter, somebody who was hired apparently without proper processes being followed. We'll touch base with our reporter at that courtroom for you in just a moment. But first, let me bring in Canny Maphanga. She's our senior reporter who's been watching developments for us here at the Madlanga Justice College as we wait, Canny, to hear any word around who this new witness is going to be for today. We're starting at 10 o'clock because yesterday we stayed on till quite late, in fact, later than usual. And a big part of the testimony from Dumisani Kumalo had to do with these minutes of the Interministerial Committee, which was actually established. In fact, let me rephrase that. That's the body that saw through to the establishment of the Political Killings Task Team.
Indeed, and the motive behind establishing that PKTT was because there was a prevailing issue of political killings in the KZN province that was clearly overwhelming that landscape. So, of course, they had to deal with it in a form of manner that had a strategy, and, of course, that what brings up the PKTT, its establishment, its tools, its operations, its resources, its budgets, all of that and more. And in the IMC minutes, what is being illustrated to the Commission by bringing those minutes there is to show that in the establishment of the PKTT that there was always a need. So there was always a need to have this particular team to address this prevailing issue. And it's a concentrated need for that particular problem. And of course, the mandate was extended where it was necessary to do so. But another thing that they were trying to illustrate is that at no point do the IMC raise any issues or concerns surrounding the PKTT, its structure, its performance, its work, or anything of that nature that could warrant that particular decision that took place on the 31st of December 2024.
Right.
Now, what is being illustrated there is that either there was no cognizance of what the IMC minutes tell you about this particular team, or there was an alleged deliberate attempt to ignore the information that was before you and to unilaterally take a decision that impacted various role players that played a key role in why this particular team was established and why some of these cold cases that you knew to be cold in the past are now seeing some movement in our criminal justice system. That is work that has been attributed to the PKTT, but it seems that despite all these advances, the decision was still made on the 31st of December 2024. So what the illustration is that the answer is not found in those IMC minutes about the alleged influence. And that is what the Commission needs to look at and continue to probe further as to where did this alleged influence come from to support this decision, because no consultation takes place, no documentation is reported on, no presentation gives you any inclination to reach this conclusion. And then the IMC itself, which is your mother body, also doesn't have any information that could inform you to reach this conclusion. So the directive that is being given there through that evidence is that now you need to explore further what was the possible influence or motivation behind such a decision.
Absolutely. It comes as no surprise then that before we went into these minutes, Dumisani Kumalo took a moment moment during his testimony to explain that he also found out about the disbandment through social media. He says it was a very festive time for many South Africans, but was in fact a moment of agony for him, given the number of calls he received from members of the specialized unit who are asking him for answers. Take a listen to that moment.
It is the 31st of December. The letter, we see it circulating on the social media, I think from the afternoon of the 1st, which is the happiest day of the year. Everybody is in a jovial mood. Then from my personal perspective, it was indeed not the Happy New Year's Day, because I had to expect or receive calls from more than 110 people that I thought I am their leader, asking me one and the same question, all of them. Unfortunately, I could not answer any of those people that were asking what's happening, because in normal situation they will expect any communication affecting them to come via myself or my office. But this time around, this letter just started to trend, and then and also the language used. Most of them were worried about the language used to say, how can we sacrifice and leave our families for 6 to 7 years, and then we are told that we are valueless, and all other weights that were there. I'm just touching on that, maybe because I have this platform to raise it. No one has asked me as an individual as to how I felt about the letter itself, but I did not feel right. That's why after I realized that I'm not enjoying the 1st of January like everybody else, I think in the afternoon I had to request Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi to bring the team together and try to also him to explain something that he does not understand. The only thing that he could do was to motivate the team and tell the team that they must continue doing what they are there for. The rest then will be dealt with by the National Commissioner. But indeed, commissioners, it was not a Happy New Year's Day because of the letter. Going to the question.
So before you go to my first question, let me just interpose this. Judging by your answer, you were not consulted about the decision to disband the PKTT.
I had never been given an opportunity to brief the ministry. I've never received any complaints or signs of unhappiness. Was never consulted when the letter then was drafted and finalized. It came as a surprise even to myself.
So there you have it, Dumisani Kumalo mentioning several times there that it was a festive moment for many South Africans, but not for him. Something tells me he was really aggrieved by the timing at the very least, but not to make light of this moment. Of course, if Dumisani Kumalo is the project lead of the political killings task team, the assumption, perhaps even the presumption, is that he would have intel on this kind of information before anyone else. So let's bring Canny Maphanga in the conversation once again, who's been watching developments with us. And Canny, what Dumisani Kumalo said yesterday about how he found out about the disbandment of this PKTT mirrors what we've heard from several people several times.
Indeed, he's pretty much in harmony with all the witnesses that have dealt with how the PKTT disbandment announcement came about. I mean, it was circulated on social media first, but it seems from evidence that, or at least the WhatsApp exchanges from Vusimuzi Kat Matlala's phone, that Brown Mokgotsi knew prior to that decision that it was going to happen, because he informs him in the WhatsApp messages that those cops that were at your home, they're going to be disbanded. And then, of course, the letter then follows. But key critical role players like Advocate Elaine Harrison of the KZN DPP, who had assigned a team to work with the PKTT on those investigations and highlighted how important this team was. She saw it on social media first. You're seeing the General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, he was on leave. As the National Commissioner, he did not know that these events were going to be coming. Lieutenant General Dumisani, the project lead and the head of intelligence, doesn't hear it from the source himself, but sees it on social media and wants to get clarity from his boss before he can give any kind of reports regarding the closing of the PKTT. General Mkhwanazi himself, he also finds out on social media, and everyone is confused about whether or not this is actually a real directive until they start to see the actions that followed afterwards, which gave them an inclination as to, according to their vantage point, of what was going on after they pounced on these alleged cartel members in December. And of course, we know that the 6th of December operation at Katiso KT Molefe's house saw its own interruptions. And then, of course, when they visited the home of Vusimuzi Cat Matlala to seek the possible whereabouts of Jerry Boshoga, that was then followed by this particular letter, which they link to the developments that were taking place at the time.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up that, let's call it a visit to Vusimuzi Cat Matlala's home, because so much has come out of that, including allegations that gadgets were stolen, really high-end items, MacBooks, we're told, Rolex watches, apparently. Adila Hasim, who led yesterday's evidence, posed that question to Dumisani Kumalo about whether or not these gadgets were taken. Dumisani Kumalo says this wasn't the case at all, but also went a step further to get us insight, at least from his vantage point, why he thinks that allegation was made to begin with.
Indeed. He states that this forms part of all of the elaborate plots that we're seeing or followed the closing in on these alleged cartels. And it was designed at, I guess, casting aspersions on the PKTT, who we know have also made it in the news for several other issues as well. But in this respect, it was to close in on those PKTT members. But of course, more importantly, its project lead, Lieutenant General Dumisani Kumalo, and I guess alleged that there was something untoward that took place with respect to the police officers. And of course, that tears at their integrity, their professionalism, their ability to do their work, and of course, casts aspersions on the operation as a whole. So it is an important fact to mention because it forms part of the alleged interferences and experiences that came with their investigations into these criminal cartels. So essentially what is being highlighted here is that once they closed in on these very powerful and big figures, that there were efforts coming in from multiple different directions to stop their work. And Vusimuzi Cat Matlala himself is heard in a recording speaking of the fact that he met with the former minister and informed him that this is what happened. And then the former minister, Beyicele, advised him not to open false cases against the police. We've heard that evidence as well in another related probe in Parliament. So it also forms part of the recordings that Witness C brought to the Commission. So it's quite open and there before the Commission that this was part of the many efforts to stop the work of the PKTT and its investigations into the criminal cartels.
Yeah, speaking about opening that case, let's take you back to yet another moment from Dumisani Kumalo's evidence yesterday. He went as far as suggesting that the affidavit that was ultimately deposed on behalf of Vusimuzi Cat Matlala wasn't even drafted by him. Take a listen to that in his own words.
I had met with the former Minister of Police, General Nhlanhla, who informed me that he had been approached by Mr. Matlala, informing him that Lieutenant General Sibiya advised him, Matlala, to submit or to write an affidavit and he also drafted such affidavit on behalf of Mr. Matlala to open a false case against myself and my members that we had stolen the watches and a MacBook, which then proved that what we saw on the founding affidavit that he had submitted to include these 3 items that were not confiscated, it confirmed that indeed it was true the information that I got from the former minister.
And there you have it, Shadrack Sibiya's name coming up once again. Dumisani Kumalo suggesting that Shadrack Sibiya drafted that affidavit for what Dumisani Kumalo is calling false case. It is a starting claim, Canny. And, you know, once again, I suppose, because this is still part of Part A, we just have to make notes of these allegations because at some stage, they're going to have to be put to these individuals whose names keep coming up over and over again.
Indeed, and those allegations will have to be tested because there's multiple role players. But this all forms part of a bigger allegation about how they started going after these PKTT members, but particularly Lieutenant General Kumalo. Because remember when that arrest happened, it was quite confusing to some in the beginning, but it began to find meaning when we started to hear testimony from Mkhwanazi at the start, who stated that he had concerns with the way that the matter was being handled or the kind of conditions that were set. Remember, Kumalo stated yesterday, he clarified that he wasn't suspended, but he cannot go to work and perform his functions. And this is the project lead for the PKTT. And what he's referring to are the bail conditions that were set in the criminal matter that he's facing over the HR-related issue and allegedly not following due process in the appointments within crime intelligence. And what was stated, or the allegation that was made against the magistrate, is that none of the parties had asked for this bail condition that they mustn't enter any office or any crime intelligence office across the country. But Mkhwanazi believes or alleges that that was done to derail the work of the investigations of the PKTT, because we know the investigations are still ongoing to quite a great extent in the number of allegations that they are looking at and the sub-officials that they're investigating for their alleged support structure that they form for the criminal cartel. So he states that this was a very strange bail condition. But remember, it was a dangerous allegation at that point to make. We know the allegations against the judiciary escalated in the case of Katiso Molefe, but at that stage, it could not be well reasoned to say that just because a bail condition didn't favor a particular accused, that it meant that the magistrate is now allegedly in cahoots with the criminal cartel. Now, because of those allegations and the seriousness of the implications or what it infers about the magistrate, but by extension the judiciary at large, the magistrate concerned decided to recuse themselves so that they can appear before the Madlanga Commission and, of course, I guess clear their name or tell their version of events regarding those particular matters. And that's what brings us back to the court there, because currently Kumalo's fighting for, I guess, the relaxation of those bail conditions so that he can go back to work, because he's not suspended. He just can't go into those offices as per the bail conditions. And then, of course, there's this issue of the recusal, whether or not that should be allowed for the magistrate, because now we know that the state is opposing such a request. So a lot is going to happen in that particular courtroom this morning when we find out as to how the matter is going to go forward, because you have a magistrate that now has to preside over a matter where he is now implicated in allegations made by not only the accused but the KZN top cop, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi.
Yeah, so once again, Dumisani Kumalo is likely to be in court today where those oral arguments are going to be heard around those bail conditions. I mean, if he's not suspended, the question he's asking is, why is he not allowed to be at work? And it's because of those bail conditions that have barred him from continuing with his work that he's raised issue with. But Canny doesn't stop there, believe it or not. I mean, we're continuing to connect the dots on the many different events that are unfolding today. We know the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee is going to be sitting. Yesterday, we'd heard from Professor Feroz Kachalia, the acting police minister, who I suppose gave his own interpretation of what's taking place. He spoke about a wide range of issues, including, of course, the fact that there is a need for lifestyle audits within the police service. At some stage, Feroz Kachalia also saying that, there needs to be a clear line of demarcation so far as those responsibilities are concerned. Today, though, we're likely to hear from the head of the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption. Canny, let's pick up on that, because this institution ties to what's likely to unfold in court today.
Indeed, without conflating the two processes, because the ad hoc and the Madlanga Commission are two different separate processes, and we know that we don't have any information about a Rule 3 or anything of that nature being sent towards the IDAC or its head advocate Andrea Johnson, but we know that there are allegations that have been made about particular prosecutors and how they may be allegedly working in cahoots with these criminal cartels, or may not be, I guess, enforcing or behaving in a manner that one would expect for a prosecutor to behave when you're dealing with cases of this nature. So serious cases of this nature. You've seen Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi question why they're not opposing bail in certain matters, why they're not advancing their arguments, or rather why the conduct of the judge may look a certain way. We've also seen inferences drawn about alleged brown envelopes that are available for this person, the detective, this person, the prosecutor, or this person, the presiding officer. So it's all about the conduct of IDAC in particular cases. He also has made allegations which don't cast IDAC in a great light with respect to the Kumalo case, because he's stating that it's a quote-unquote alleged politically motivated case. So a case that is not of merit, but one that seeks to I guess, form a kind of alleged witch hunt against against Lieutenant General Kumalo. So that is the allegation that she has to answer to. Of course, that has serious implications for the integrity of the institution that is designed to deal with these kinds of serious offences. And remember, there's also an allegation that because of the scope of IDAC, they should not have been dealing with what he watered down as HR-related matters or labour matters. I think that's how he described it before the commission. So it is in that context that I think she will be explaining the work of the IDAC and, of course, its role in some of these cases that it's presided over, particularly that of Kumalo. But keeping in mind that these are two separate processes and IDAC has yet to appear here. We've heard allegations, but they're yet to appear here, and they'll be appearing at the ad hoc parliamentary process that has different powers, different processes, etc.
Absolutely, and we're showing you now the live visuals of what's taking place in Parliament at the moment, where the ad hoc committee is also going to be sitting at 10 o'clock. So you're really spoiled for choice about which of these two separate cases you can continue to watch today, given what's likely to unfold, coincidentally, at 10 o'clock. Still relatively empty, I imagine, inside that room. But of course, Andrea Johnson, as we've mentioned, is going to be in the hot seat today. And she hopefully will provide clarity around, at the very least, the claims that have been made so far in the public domain about the work that IDAC ought to be doing, given the circumstances under which it was established. And perhaps, Canny, it's work picking up on that. The Investigating Directorate Against Corruption wasn't always a permanent structure. It was actually put together off the back of the Zondo Commission.
Yes, indeed. The Zondo Commission was dealing with evidence that dealt with very sophisticated levels of crime, your corruption, highly sophisticated crime. And when the Zondo Commission, I guess, left its work, it became clear that the threshold to prosecute these kinds of cases is quite high. You're going to need a lot more than just someone giving a statement under oath. And that is the context upon which we see the specialized unit coming in to address this, high-level, sophisticated type of crime. So that's where the criticism came, that how does this particular body come into a matter which the witnesses you see are reducing to a mere HR, labor-related kind of dispute, but you're seeing a unit of this level of sophistication operating in that particular space. So that was the criticism that was levied against IDAC, that it should not be focused on cases like this, that it should have more of a specialized approach towards corruption matters. But that is something that I think the advocate Andrea Johnson will speak to regarding the criticism with relation to Kumalo's case that he's facing over the, the alleged lack of due process in the appointments in crime intelligence.
You speak about that. I understand that we have a live shot for you that we can bring up of the situation inside the Pretoria Magistrates Court, where Dumisani Kumalo is meant to once again be present, to re-emphasize once again, which is a redundancy, to emphasize for you the issues that are likely to be ventilated inside that courtroom for you are around Dumisani Kumalo's bail conditions. You remember he was charged with fraud and corruption in relation to an appointment which apparently was executed without following due process. And he has taken umbrage with the bail conditions that were given at that time, essentially barring him from continuing with his work as the case itself unfolds. The last time we were inside that courtroom, it was a moment of high drama, actually, because at some stage we saw Malisela Tefu, a name which perhaps you're now familiar with, given what we've seen unfold at the Senzo Meyiwa murder case. He appeared in that courtroom saying he wants to be accepted as a friend of the court. he went on to then make all manner of allegations against Dumisani Kumalo, suggesting that Lieutenant General Kumalo and his team have exercised an abuse of power and have targeted certain people. He's yet to substantiate those claims, but of course, the court wasn't really able to entertain that because he hadn't brought forward a formal application. So that is what we're anticipating in part will be unfolding today. We're expecting to hear from Malisela Defu whether or not he's got this formal bail application before going into the substance of the recusal issue we had spoken about from the magistrate, who we understand also wants to, at the very least, make some kind of representation here at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. It is involved. There is a lot of moving parts, and I'm hoping that we've been able to explain some of those very clearly as we wait for these processes to unfold. So it's what's happening in the Pretoria Magistrates Court that we're anticipating. It's what's happening at the ad hoc committee at 10 o'clock. And of course, the developments we're watching for you here at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. Really different pages, if you like, of the same book. And Canny, to bring you in once again with 30 minutes to go before this particular process is meant to begin, we still don't really know who's going to take to the stand. All we know is that it is going to be open to the public, and suppose because we're still in phase one, it's going to be a continuation of the building up of this case brought by Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi.
Yeah, indeed. You'll continue to hear the mapping out of the evidence in chief, if I could put it that way, or the allegations in chief that are being placed before the commission. It's likely to be evidence that relates directly to the disbandment of the PKTT with respect to, I guess, from the SABC point of view, because for the past few weeks we've really delved into various areas of the South African police services, whether it's the Hawks, seemingly contradicting one another on this descending of their presence on the property of Katiso KT Molefe, whether it's the disbandment from the point of view of intelligence. What we haven't heard about is the moving of the dockets in quite great detail. Maybe it could be about that, but we know it'll be the evidence in chief because we're not yet near phase two, where it is the implicated persons reporting back to the commission to give their version of events. We're still very much in phase one, where you're laying out or mapping out the allegations that the commission has to test and hear before the nation.
Absolutely. All right, Canny Maphanga, thanks very much indeed for helping us connect the dots. Policy, we can be here all day, but of course I know there's plenty other issues to try and cover with the time we have left before, of course, the ad hoc committee officially sits and the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry also gets underway.